Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. No body, no case. It was said in English law after the miracle of Campton. But in our story there is no body, but there is a case. On a November morning in 2011, Galina Kolyadzinskaya returned home to her rented apartment on Uborevicha Street in Vladivostok and disappeared. 3 years later, her boyfriend Viktor Cohen was convicted of her murder. But no physical evidence of Galina's alleged death was presented at the trial, and her parents still believe she is alive and are waiting for her return. In April 2024, Viktor Cohen was released from prison, and the case regained popularity, dividing the public into two camps. Some believe that Viktor served time for a crime that did not happen, while others are convinced that the sentence received for murder is too short. Let's find out together how a high-profile criminal case about the disappearance and murder of a man with no evidence progressed throughout the country, causing controversy among observers and the creation of groups to search for Galina. Viktor Polovov was born July 9, 1988 in Vladivostok. He took the surname Cohen in 2012. Parents divorced when the boy was very young, so his upbringing completely fell on the female shoulders of his mother and grandmother. In 2005, he graduated from high school, gymnasium of the Far Eastern State University. He entered the Institute of Mass Communications of the same university at the Department of PR, but after 6 months, he dropped out. In 2007, Galina Kolyadzinskaya introduced her classmate Viktor to her sister Galina, who was 3.5 years older than him. Galina Kolyadzinskaya was born on April 22, 1985 in Rostov-on-Don. At the age of 13, her parents moved to Vladivostok. The girl was distinguished by a bright appearance, stood out theatricalized manner of dressing. She was slender, well-read, and very artistic. She graduated from school, studied at an art school, then entered the Faculty of Design of the Far Eastern Federal University. Viktor was smitten with her, and for the first time, he truly fell in love. Both of them dreamed of entering the Theater Institute, so Viktor dropped out of school and they left their native Vladivostok for Moscow. Galina failed the entrance exams, but Vitya did not. But out of solidarity with his favorite girl, he decided to return home. Both returned to Vladivostok, where they started living together. On his return, Viktor learned about his grandfather's death and the inheritance he had left him. With this money, the lovers rented an apartment in the city center, bought a car each, and decided to invest the remaining sum in a profitable business. They tried to organize a shop for the production of car tires, opened a network of donut shops, and even resold church kila, but all projects quickly went into loss, which led the young couple in despondency. Over time, disagreements between the young people began to destroy their relationship. The couple quarreled violently, and it did not do without violence. Once Galina's friends witnessed a quarrel between them, when Viktor lifted his girlfriend by the neck. However, Galina sometimes did the same. She could hit her boyfriend or break the furniture in their rented apartment. Eventually, Galina started going to nightclubs more and more often, and Viktor became interested in other women, running away from the problems in his current life. On the morning of November 14, 2011, Galina returned home after another visit to the club and was very much on her merry way. Viktor was not at home, which made Galina furious, and at 6:43 a.m. she called him and demanded his immediate return. 15 minutes later, Viktor was already in their rented apartment. A quarrel took place between the young people, as a result of which they decided to finally part ways. Instead of the previously donated car, Galina demanded 300,000 rubles from Viktor, and then she would leave and not bother him. Viktor gave her the money, and she left the apartment, as it turned out, forever. The next day, Galina's parents got worried and started calling her, but her phone was switched off. Viktor did not answer their calls either. Only on the second day after Galina left, he contacted the girl's mother and told her that there had been a quarrel. She had extorted a large sum of money from him, then packed her things and left. "You will never see me again. Don't look for me. Tell my mom that everything is fine with me." Galina's last words from Viktor's words. He also told Galina's mother that he repeatedly called her after she left. But the girl did not answer his calls either, because the phone was simply turned off. At first, friends and parents of the missing Galina were not surprised by her sudden disappearance, because she was famous for her flighty behavior and could disappear for several days. But 3 days later, Galina Kolyadzinskaya's father wrote a statement to the police about his daughter's disappearance, and the law enforcement agencies began to search for her. Specialists zealously took up the case, and Victor was first of all summoned to the station for a conversation. He was the last person to see Galina and could clarify many points of interest. During the interrogation, Victor did not deny that he often quarreled with his girlfriend, whom he had grown cold to and had another woman. Victor said that he was fed up with his scandalous girlfriend, who in a fit of jealousy could raise her hand against him or pour yogurt on his car. Once, being in an inebriated state, Galina said she would tear her rival's hair out if he continued to date her. "I didn't kill Galina. Yes, we quarreled with her. She packed her things, took all our money, 300,000 rubles, and left. Where she went, I don't know," Victor insisted. The investigation team also examined the apartment where the young people lived together, both their cars, but no traces of blood or other evidence pointing to Galina's murder were found. Victor was even tested on a lie detector. During the interview, the young man was confused in his testimony, but his involvement in Galina's disappearance was not proven. Having questioned Galina's acquaintances and neighbors, the police decided to refuse to initiate a criminal case, as no signs of corpus delicti were found. However, Galina had never traveled outside Vladivostok. She did not have a foreign passport. Victor collected Galina's belongings and gave them to her parents, and he himself moved in with his new girlfriend Tatiana and started a new life. The feelings of young people were so strong that in 2012 they decided to get married. It was then that Victor finally got rid of his father's surname, which had been weighing him down since childhood. He liked the Cohen option, which was offered by his future wife, who heard the beautiful surname in one of the movies. Everyone forgot about the missing Galina Kolyadzinskaya for several years. 3 years of married life of a young married couple, Cohen flew quite happily. They traveled a lot, went to the mountains, and lived a quiet and measured life. But everything changed when the case of Galina's disappearance was reclassified as a murder case, because for 3 years she never showed up. Galina's mother, Galina Kolyadzinskaya, did not worry much at first. She knew that her daughter was a creative and fickle nature, could go somewhere just by mood. Perhaps this explains why the case did not become a criminal case for almost 3 years, because no one insisted. In June 2014, based on the materials of the inspection on the fact of Galina Kolyadzinskaya's unknown disappearance, a criminal case under the article Murder was initiated. The girl was put on the wanted list as missing, and employees of the Crime Investigation Department began to work out various versions of Galina's disappearance, from going abroad to work in the modeling business to murder. In the course of working out the latter version, Kolyadzinskaya's ex-boyfriend came to the attention of the police. It turned out that Cohen and Galina often quarreled. The girl made him jealous scenes because of his relationship with another woman. There was also information that Galina was planning a trip to Korea. In her youth, she had already worked as a model in China and was going to continue her career in this field. Ex-boyfriend Viktor Cohen became the main suspect because he was the last person who saw Galina alive. The testimony regarding the facts of Galina's disappearance, which Victor and witnesses had previously given at various stages of the case, also gave reason to believe that Victor might be involved in the crime. On July 23, 2014, Victor was summoned for questioning, where he was detained and taken to the investigation unit. There he confessed that after another quarrel, in the morning of November 14, 2011, he strangled Galina, subsequently dismembered the body in the bathroom, put the remains in 3 plastic buckets, took them to a wooded area near the factory Variag, where he built a fire with tires, burned the body, and scattered the ashes in different places. Victor Cohen behaved confidently during the interrogation. He spoke to the investigator on "you," did not choose expressions, and swore a lot. He frankly, as at a friendly conversation, told the story of his life from birth to the present day, Experienced operatives were amazed at the coolness and cynicism with which he recalled how he dismembered and burned Galina. The former lover sat in front of the police officers with his feet on the ground and smiled. He felt invulnerable. Victor lamented to the investigator that he had originally intended to boil the body in a steamer, put it through a meat grinder, and flush it down the toilet. But he eventually abandoned this method, fearing that the sewer system would be clogged and he could be identified. At the same interrogation, he stated that he strangled Galina because she was interfering with his new relationship. According to Victor's memories, his ex-girlfriend was an unconventional person who craved attention. She often disappeared in nightclubs, and because of the fiery temper, could make a loud scandal at home. In conversations, Galina often mentioned that she would like a beautiful life of an escort model, and at the same time did not want to believe the arguments that without the provision of services of an intimate nature, such work is impossible. Victor accepted all the eccentric actions of his friend and continued to consider her a pleasant and interesting person until a certain time. From Viktor Cohen's interrogation, I was taken by annoyance. I was standing near the coffee machine. I took a coffee. As I stood there, something in me turned. There was this one person, and that was it. I went home, walked over to her sleeping, said, "I'm sorry," and started choking her. She woke up, started to struggle. I strangled her for a long time. Then I left the house and cried. It wasn't fear, it was frustration, loss. I realized what I had done, but as a rational person, I did not lose my temper. After the interrogation, the operatives took Victor to the house where he lived with Galina Kolyadzinskaya in November 2011 for an investigative experiment. In the apartment, Victor demonstrated how he strangled Galina on a folding sofa that night. According to him, she did not resist as she was drunk and fell asleep. When he was convinced that she was dead, he left the apartment in a hurry and went to his car, where he came up with a cold-blooded plan to get rid of the body. Victor learned about the intricate way to get rid of the body from a documentary about India, where the bodies of the deceased are burned, and quite often use car tires for this ritual to reach the right burning temperature. Victor told the operatives that it was much easier to kill and dispose of the body than he had imagined. Late at night, Victor was taken to the very vacant lot where he allegedly disposed of Galina's remains. In pitch darkness, Cohen had to point out the specific place where he had burned the girl's body. According to human rights activists, he was taken to a place where there were no traffic or CCTV cameras, so that there was no way to prove his innocence. The case also lacked important details, which Victor himself pointed out repeatedly. It was not clear how and what he used to cut up the body, because an ordinary kitchen knife could not be used. Further, it was not quite clear how he managed to put Galina's remains in 3 buckets, and how he carried these buckets out of the entrance in full view of everyone, and why no one paid attention to it. Then the investigation questioned the Bygolovs, who rented the apartment to Galina and Victor. They admitted that they were unable to contact Victor after they learned that the police were in the apartment. When they arrived to check their accommodation, they found the apartment empty. There were no tenants or their belongings. On the ceiling, they found brown-colored splatters, as the couple thought it was from coffee or tea, and there were black streaks on the wallpaper, most likely from storing car tires. But the detainee, Viktor Cohen, did not know that his interrogations were recorded by a video camera. When he realized that he had told too much on camera, he recanted his testimony, stating that during the interrogation at the Operative Investigation Unit on Uborevicha Street, they forced confessions out of him using unauthorized interrogation methods, and when his wife Tatiana came to the same station, Victor was threatened that they would harm her as well. He added that the story he told during the hour-long interrogation was made up by the operative officers, and that the place where the remains were burnt was determined based on his phone billing that night. But was torture really torture? In the CCTV footage from the investigation unit, Tatiana Cohen drove up to the building at 6 p.m. She was not allowed inside, so she stayed outside. 20 minutes later, Victor was brought in for questioning, and Tatiana also entered the building around 6:30 p.m. The recording of the interrogation started at 6:38 p.m., tortured for 8 minutes, whipped out a confession, made up a colorful and bloodthirsty story in great detail. On August 11, 2015, as a result of the first court hearing, Viktor Cohen was found guilty of the murder of Galina Kolyadzinskaya, and by the court verdict of August 11, 2015, he was sentenced to 9 years, 10 months of imprisonment, with serving his sentence in a penal colony of strict regime. After Viktor Cohen was charged with murder, his wife Tatiana became his most faithful defense counsel, convinced of his innocence. All Vladivostok residents actively followed the story and even went out to rallies in support of Viktor Cohen. People divided themselves into defenders and accusers. Viktor's wife continued to fight for her husband and did not lower her hands even after the terrible news that her spouse would have to spend almost 10 years behind bars. The revealing video, which was kept in the criminal case, was shown during the court session. The case became a high-profile one, because during the court proceedings, Viktor said that confessions were beaten out of him by interrogators with the help of threats and torture, as evidenced by hospital discharges, where he was diagnosed with concussion and ear barotrauma. A young, handsome man with huge brown eyes had strangled, dismembered, and burned his girlfriend in cold blood. No one could believe it. Charismatic guy could become an actor. He was even admitted to the Moscow Theater Institute. True, as we already know, Viktor refused to study. Friends, classmates, just acquaintances from all sides described him positively. Lawyers built their defense on the fact that in the apartment, where, according to the investigation, the murder took place, and at the place where he burned the body, not even traces of human DNA were found. There were even witnesses who allegedly saw Galina in the city after she disappeared. The public was fueled by Galina's mother, Galina Kolyadzinskaya. The unhappy woman sincerely believed that her daughter was alive. In all interviews, she said that Viktor was not guilty, and Galina would soon come back and tell why she had disappeared and where she had been all this time. After the guilty verdict, Viktor Cohen continued to call the circumstances of the murder, presented to the investigation, completely invented. After all, no biological traces were found at the alleged place of burning the remains of the victim. The forensic examination, conducted in Cohen's car and apartment, did not give convincing results either. The defendant was also sided with Galina's parents, who were convinced that their daughter was alive. The defendant's lawyer, Ivan Mikhailev, said at the time that the investigation had no objective evidence. The examination of the soil at the clearing, where his client allegedly burned the body, also yielded nothing. The examination did not show any biological traces. Later, it turned out that some of the case materials were also missing: inspection reports of the apartment and the car, lie detector data, and video from the camera, which were obtained back in 2011. Cohen's family and defense believed that the case was reclassified in order to relieve himself of responsibility for the unsolved crime. Galina was never found. Not agreeing with the court verdict, Viktor filed an appeal and began to claim that he was not involved in the commission of the incriminated crime, and the confession was forced out of him by law enforcement officers. Tatiana Cohen launched a large-scale campaign in support of her husband. She appeared on various talk shows and programs, gathered rallies, actively maintained social networks, where she actively collected money for a lawyer, in return posting fake reports. On December 7, 2015, the Court of Appeals overturned the verdict due to violations of the Code of Criminal Procedure, and the case was sent to the Court of First Instance for a new trial in a different court. After the retrial by the Court of First Instance, Viktor Cohen was also found guilty of the murder of Galina Kolyadzinskaya, and by the verdict of June 21, 2016, he was sentenced to 9 years and 9 months of imprisonment, with serving his sentence in a strict regime colony. The sentence was again appealed, but this time the Court of Appellate Instance on November 28, 2016 upheld the sentence, and Viktor Cohen went to serve his sentence. After the appeal, Tatiana withdrew from all affairs, divorced Viktor, and remarried. As it turned out, her role as a wife was a carefully planned game, because Tatiana began a new relationship immediately after Viktor's detention. Nobody expected such a turn of events. Tatiana herself refused to comment. Despite the fact that the body of Galina Kolyadzinskaya was not found, The court ruled on the basis of circumstantial evidence against Viktor Cohen, and there was plenty of it. First of all, this confession, in which Viktor says that after the murder, he decided to get rid of the body by grinding it in a meat grinder. He went to the shopping center Maxim for it, where he actually bought a meat grinder and a pressure cooker in the Domotechnica store. In 2015, the investigation made a seizure of records from the database of the store about the purchases of meat grinders for November 14, 2011, and in one of the records was the surname Polovov. The time on the billing and the receipt from the database of the store coincide. Also, the store administrator confirmed in court that there was no tampering with the database for the purpose of falsification. Further, Viktor Cohen's cell phone billings played an important role in the verdict. On November 14, 2011, from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m., Viktor stayed in the apartment. Most likely, he dismembered the body, and at night he took buckets with the body to the woods near the Variag plant. Viktor repeatedly reported that he called Galina after she left, but her phone was unavailable. However, Viktor's phone billing showed that he did not call Galina between 10 a.m. and night. The last phone conversation he had was with Tatiana at 11:51 p.m., just in the neighborhood of the Variag plant. Moreover, if you listen to the court sessions where the billing of Galina Kolyadzinskaya and Viktor is announced, it is obvious that after Galina's disappearance, her relatives, friends, even Viktor's mother called her, but not Viktor himself. Given the fact that everyone is looking for Galina and Viktor is under suspicion, if it were him, anyone would send at least a message to his missing friend. But Viktor didn't do it. Obviously, he knew there would be no answer. Also in the case were sales receipts for 3 20-liter plastic buckets with lids and locks, bought the same day as the meat grinder. Unfortunately, there is no last name on the receipts, so it is not proven that it was Viktor Cohen who bought them. But how could Galina fit into 3 20-liter buckets? Another piece of circumstantial evidence was the enamel in the bathroom. Viktor dismembered Galina in the bathtub, having covered everything with foil to hide the traces of blood. He then scrubbed the tub with a metal brush with such force that he erased the enamel. In the confession video, Viktor voiced that Galina had ruined the enamel on the bathtub by regularly cleaning it with alkaline or acidic products. Witnesses who claimed to have seen Galina at a supermarket in Vladivostok and at Sheremetyevo Airport in Moscow after she went missing turned out to be false. According to the airport's CCTV cameras, a similar girl was not found. A criminal case was opened against one of the witnesses under the article on giving false testimony. While studying this case, the only and the main question was spinning in my head. So why were no other clues found? It is impossible to anticipate and hide even the smallest details. After all, if Viktor really killed Galina, at least some traces must remain. And the answer was simple. It's time. For the first few days, Viktor wouldn't let the police into his apartment. He immediately moved in with Tatiana, and the owners of the apartment knew nothing about what had happened. He finally took his belongings only on December 8th. No one opened the door to the police officer who came to check on him. The police did not get into the apartment until 12 days later. They did not use luminol, but simply fixed the situation. On December 10th, the owners of the apartment started renovation. The 2 cars were inspected only on December 27th. Let me remind you that Galina disappeared on November 14th. Consequently, Viktor had about 3 weeks to clean the apartment and cover his tracks, and a month and a half to clean the interior of the car. Why, then, were neither traces of DNA nor Galina's remains found? According to the conclusion of experts, it is still possible to completely burn the body in artisanal conditions, and that's exactly what happened in this case. The black pieces, which Viktor said he scattered in the forest near the place of burning, could be scattered by wild animals, thus depriving the investigation of the last possible evidence. Viktor burned Galina, who had been dismembered into pieces, on tires, giving the right temperature to burn the bones. All that was left of her were black charred bone fragments. He did not specify the exact location of the bonfire, citing the long time lapse. He had forgotten. In order to find the remains of the body would have to sift through a sieve a huge area of the forest. But why, if the killer is found? For more than 13 years, nothing is known about Galina Kolyadzinskaya, and the last day of her life is described from the words of the man who was convicted for her murder. Assuming that Viktor Cohen did not kill after all, where could Galina have gone? Experienced retired investigators in an informal conversation with journalists say that in today's world, it is almost impossible to get lost unless you are a professional in the intelligence service. In 13 years, Galina had to be found somehow. Even if she lived abroad under a false name, she could not help but leave traces. After all, even to replace her documents, she would have had to be fingerprinted, which means she would have been identified. Viktor Cohen married someone else, claims torture, but never once mentions that Galina will definitely come back, that he is waiting for her, and she will definitely prove his innocence. But he knows perfectly well that the main witness is not there and cannot be. Not once did Viktor say that he served time innocently, that 10 years of his life were stolen from him, that he lost his beloved wife Tatiana, who preferred not to wait for him from prison. He has no grudge against the system, no desire to fight for his honest name, to sue, to prove his innocence. He knows that the body will never be found. He burned it to the ground. There is no evidence. This gives him the opportunity to make up all these versions of the disappearance, and he behaves just as if he had served time for his crime. Now he is clean. What claims can there be? He was convicted. He served time. He has redeemed everything. An innocent person would not be so cold-blooded as to incriminate himself, and even in such detail. Despite the already closed case, many people all over the country still can't believe what happened. They are still looking for Galina on their own. For this purpose, they place ads on forums and periodically post photos of girls who resemble her very much, because Galina's parents are still waiting for her to come home. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many shocking stories ahead of you.